Assalamu alaikum, welcome to Game Changer. I'm Maryam Zia. In today's program, we will be talking about the dramatic race for US presidency that is set to be held on November 5th, 2024. And before that, of course, we will be talking about the shocking turn of events in which former President Donald Trump survived an assassination attempt. Of course, this is going to be a close rematch between former President Donald Trump and incumbent Joe Biden. And of course, this recent attack on Donald Trump shows how much of course, there is a gap and political, of course, differences within US. In today's program, we will be talking about the consequences of this political violence within American history as well. And of course, when we look at the polls, it shows that recent polls shows that 2/3 of Americans fear that election could further lead to further violence. We will be talking about what lies ahead and what it holds for US politics as well as for the global politics. To discuss this and more, we are joined in the studios by Mr. Sheharyar, who is an analyst. Welcome to the program. We are also joined by Mr. Raja Faisal, who is geopolitical analyst. Welcome to the program. And we are joined online by former Ambassador Ali Sarwar Naqvi. Welcome to the program. Raja Faisal, let me start with you. Of course, when we talk about this, let me start with a very basic question. When we talk about this close rematch between, of course, former President Donald Trump and Joe Biden, what do you make of it, especially after the first televised debate and the blunders of Joe Biden in it, and how the polls show all this?
Yeah, you know, if we look at the current scenario of whatever the things are shaping up for US election 2024, I think it would be quite similar to whatever happened post-election, the previous election. We saw violence on the streets, and that too had a lot to do with the kind of election that was conducted, and the people at large, they had reservations on it, that there were the element of rigging and their establishment, of course powerful establishment that actually took part in it, and of course they were not in sort of favor. And this is what the narratives which were shaped by Donald Trump and his followers at that time. And if we look at the current situation, of course, we have been seeing that the Democrats themselves, they were not okay with the name of nomination name of Joe Biden running for the second term. They were not sort of okay with it. There are certain other names that they can be okay, like Kamala Harris. She is vice president. She can be the first female president.
But her approval ratings are somewhat similar to Joe Biden and, of course, former President Trump.
I mean, looking at the whole picture, of course, Joe Biden, if we talk about him as a president, he has personal issues, he has stammer, and that shouldn't be a hurdle to him becoming a president once more. But he has a sort of sometimes he goes blank, and
he loses his train of thought quite often.
That for a president of most powerful country of the world, that is a problem. And if we look at his policies are further continuation to
right. We will be coming to policies of both, of course, the contestants later in the show, but coming to this, of course, shocking turn of events where there was attempted assassination attempt at former President Donald Trump. How do you think this is going to be shaping public perception of Donald Trump?
So, Maryam, this was like a very, I would say, a shocking event, especially in the context of the US. And this basically goes to show and points toward a wider issue in the US society that is now moving towards a lot of political polarization. And I would say rather than political polarization, it's like more emotional in nature as well. And both camps, they are moving towards more of a hatred of like the other candidates in the other parties rather than discussing policy issues. And this obviously can part be attributed to Donald Trump and how he has basically led his election campaign and his previous term as well, which obviously left a lot of like sour taste in the US society. But now I've been noticing something very different. After this assassination attempt, the first statement that came out of the Donald Trump's camp, it was of calling for unity. And given the fact that in the last I would say a few months, Donald Trump's whole rhetoric has been very divisive in the US society. And a lot of like analysts are now saying that now that Donald Trump is changing the rhetoric, a lot of like swing voters who are historically very center, they are now gravitating more towards Donald Trump's side. And definitely this event, as unfortunate as it looks, has given a lot of like points to Donald Trump's campaign. And I personally believe that this will obviously boost his popularity a lot. The visuals that came out from that incident, in which like the US flag was there and he was raising his fist and calling for unity and fighting against like this divisiveness, that has really increased his stature in the US.
Right. Let me take this question to Ali Sarwar Naqvi Saab. Naqvi Saab, what's your take on this? How significant is former President Donald Trump's lead in these swing states, and which states are considered, of course, key battlegrounds when we talk about this?
Yes, well, the situation is rather worrisome because US elections are in jeopardy due to the violence that has occurred. But it's not the first time in US politics. You see, there was an assassination attempt on Theodore Roosevelt. There was assassination attempt on Gerald Ford. There was assassination attempt on Ronald Reagan, and all these people survived and they became presidents and served their terms. However, there were many fatalities also, starting with Abraham Lincoln to John Kennedy.
Attempts, of course.
There is this violence streak in US politics, but whenever that occurs, it causes a kind of upheaval or a ripple effect on the election system itself. So I think the overall picture is rather worrisome. As for the states, the key states, you see, it starts with New Hampshire, where there is a primary in January or February, which sets the ball rolling. Then the key states are considered to be Michigan and Iowa, and now there is going to be a Republican convention today in Milwaukee. So all these states are important, but the big states are New York, California, and Florida, which have a big number of electoral votes and also popular votes. So this whole process will go on till November, and then on the first Tuesday of November, there will be the elections. So we have to see how this process goes against this background of violence.
Right. And Naqvi Saab, what do you make of the political rhetoric? How do you think it has shaped, of course, public opinion surrounding this, of course, assassination attempt at former President Donald Trump?
Yes, you see, what was said a little earlier, there is great polarization in US society, and the polarization cuts across race and ethnic lines, because the support for Trump is not just of the white Americans. There are many other people who are disgruntled with the system who also support Trump, because he represents or promises to have changes made in the entire political system. There are those who are against the favors given to the blacks. This is the far right fringe. Then there are those who are afraid of migrants who are going into the US in big numbers and stealing the jobs of the Americans. Then there are those who are worried about foreign goods coming into the US, like goods from China, and they want Chinese goods to be stopped. So all these elements in the electorate, in the US electorate, are going to uh, cast their votes and to give their preference for one of the two candidates. Biden represents the status quo, and the status quo does not suit many Americans. And that is why there is the popularity of Trump. Trump draws upon people in different segments of society who want change to come about. And Trump represents more promises of change than Biden.
Right, right. We will touch upon these key policy issues that are going to be shaping up the incoming elections. But at the same time, Raja Sahab, what about the legal troubles that are unprecedented that former President Donald Trump has been facing? Do you think this is going to be having an impact, or do you think that the recent assassination attempt and the visuals that went out are going to be holding a key factor in the swing states?
I think now if we talk about the cases against Donald Trump, there were cases against him, and of course few of the cases they are related to the violence erupted last time around
2021, yes.
Post-elections. And I believe that now after this incident, he might sort of get favors in that context because he has the sympathy with him, and he has always been maintaining a narrative in which he said that the establishment doesn't want me to contest this election, and his of course party, the Republicans, they only go for his name because he has actually outclassed everyone in terms of shaping up narrative and gathering sort of support for him, and the kind of support he has gained that is sort of marvelous in this context, that after after Bush, he is the one who has actually grabbed on that kind of support. But when we talk about Donald Trump and Biden, on certain issues related, few of the issues obviously they are highlighted by the worthy ambassador himself, but if we talk about the foreign policy issues related to Middle East, related to Ukraine, that is going to be pivotal, that is going to be very important in this election as well.
Right, right. So let's start talking about the key issues, starting from the foreign policy. What are the key differences that both candidates are going to be presenting and shaping up the narrative, and how voters are reacting to those issues, especially when we talk about war in Ukraine and of course support for Israel, or of course the narrative regarding Gaza?
Yeah, obviously if we talk about Ukraine, then Trump, he doesn't want a prolonged war, and he wants to fix it for Europe and for of course the whole region. And if we talk about Biden himself, Biden is of the view that we should be leaving it up to Europe to fix it, and we should only be extending the support. They want a prolonged war because in that context, of course, all of the arms industry of US, it is of course getting benefit out of it. So he wants a prolonged war. We shouldn't be forgetting that the arms industry is one of the biggest supporters of Biden this time around as well, and in the previous elections as well. And if we talk about Middle Eastern theater, then there is not only one theater. Now we are seeing that Yemen crisis brewing as well, and in that context, of course, Yemen is a place, of course, where we would be seeing another war in coming days, and Gaza itself. About Gaza and Palestine, both of the leaders, Biden and Trump, they have quite similar views. But when it comes to solution to that problem, to me, I think Biden hasn't got a solution. Biden is more sort of a problem to it because he is someone who has in past highlighted and openly said it that you don't have to be a Jew to be a Zionist. So he claims to be a Zionist, and he says that he is in this in their favor. And if we talk about the Israeli government right now, it's not a secret at all that it's a Zionist state, and of course it's run by Netanyahu, who is a Zionist himself.
But Faisal, do you think that the public pressure or the voters' perception of the whole issue is going to be impacting or changing the political strategies surrounding the issue?
That is where the solution lies. Reason being, if we talk about Trump of course respects the element of sentiment which has been displayed by people of America at large, especially in the university students, the youthful people. They came out in favor of Palestine, in favor of Gaza, and we can see and we can sense that he will honor and respect the voice of the people. But when it comes to Biden, I mean, we have been seeing in recent times the heavy-handedness of Biden's regime against all of these protesters. This is an evidence that they won't be allowing any of the room for these protesters or anyone who talks in favor of Gaza or Palestine. They won't be allowing that.
Right. And Sheharyar, coming to the issue of economy, how do you see that both candidates are going to be, of course, handling the issue, and what do you make of the strategies, especially election strategies surrounding economy?
So both candidates have already given their election manifestos, and their previous policies also are a reflection of how they would be taking forward the American economy, which is struggling at the moment because of high inflation, like higher cost of living, and unemployment is also rising, and the interest rates are high. So that's not only affecting the American economy, it's also affecting the global financial system as well. Now there are like four key areas that are being discussed that are priority areas. One is like when it comes to infrastructure development. Other than that, there is a tax policy on how the US would be taking forward their taxation regime. So when it comes to the Biden administration, they are more towards taxing the rich and obviously increasing the tax rate on corporations and everything, and more of a redistributive tax policy. But when it comes to Donald Trump and his regime, they have always been proponents of hardcore neoliberal economic policy. So in neoliberal economic policy, they basically advocate for lesser taxes for corporations and like lesser government regulation as well. Other than that, the other issue that is like coming up would be green energy, climate change, and we know that Trump administration
on that,
historically has been very anti-climate change, and he's also like given theories in which he has denied that the whole phenomenon of climate change even exists.
So economy remains an issue in which Joe Biden may be having more, preference among the voters.
When it comes to curtailing unemployment, Joe Biden's administration has given a lot of results. But when it comes to, let's say, unemployment in the sense that bringing more jobs to the US, the whole
controlling
narrative,
inflation.
Controlling inflation as well. So the narrative that like Donald Trump basically propagates, that's like America first policy. So that's like more related to US economic interests globally, and especially vis-a-vis China, vis-a-vis rising economies in the US, when it comes to Far East policy, Asia Pacific policy. So that in that sense, Trump sees China more as an opponent. So even in the last regime, when Donald Trump was president, he was like very confrontational with China. So he placed a lot of tariffs, a lot of barriers on Chinese products coming into the US. He basically went against a lot of like Chinese corporations like Huawei and like a lot of telecommunication 5G companies, and they basically declared them as a national security threat as well. So when it comes to the economic policy vis-a-vis China, Donald Trump and his team would be more, I would say, conservative and more targeted towards the rise of China. With Biden and his administration, they have had more of a competitive policy on to see how, in which sectors they can compete with China and which sectors they have to basically curtail China to get access to European Union or the US markets as well. Other than that, the main divisive issue that even the whole population of the US is talking about, that's immigration.
And let me take the issue of immigration to Ali Sarwar Naqvi Sahab. Ali Sarwar Naqvi Sahab, how do you think that the issue of immigration is going to be shaping up voter perception?
Yes, I think this is perhaps the most important issue, even though they don't describe it as such. But this is the most important issue facing not only the United States, but the entire Western world. And what does it signify? The Western world, the white population, is against the entry of non-whites because they are facing now a threat from the non-whites in such big numbers that the majority will be reduced, and they will be reduced to a minority if too many non-whites enter their country. So this applies to the United States, and Trump, I think, is more vociferous about it, even though Biden also worries about the immigration policy. So it reflects in the actions against Mexico. It reflects against stringent rules, especially against Muslim countries and many other third world countries. And Trump is going to further reinforce that. Biden is also following that policy, but to a lesser extent than what Trump would do. So I think immigration is the key issue, but then there are economic issues, and that is why I said the polarization of the US society is very apparent. It is manifest not only in regard to the electoral support of each candidate, but also in regard to the actual divisiveness in American society. And this, I think, is a new element or a new factor that marks American politics. It has not been the case before. The blacks used to be given a special treatment after the Civil Rights Acts and after the Great Society concept of Lyndon Johnson. All that is being dismantled, and now they are trying to go back into an insular world in which the whites will be protected from the incursions of the non-whites.
Right, of course. So these cultural issues remain key to, of course, the whole debate as well. But let's talk about the health issue. How significant is healthcare going to be in, of course, shaping up a voters' perception? And what about Obamacare that we know that, of course, Joe Biden vouched for?
Yeah, that's a very good question. And even if we look at the debate itself, the key time which was given to it was health program and what is going to be, because health issues, there are health issues which are being faced by people at large in US, and it is the debate of US in it has always been in the modern era, and that is why we saw that Obama came up with the policy of Obamacare, and that has been, of course, continued by Biden himself. But there are certain issues still related to the health sector that are being highlighted by both sides, and somehow, of course, Trump himself claims that once he comes into power, of course, he would come up with the policy that would, of course, replace the Obamacare. Reason being, his policy or his sort of Trump care would be even better than Obamacare itself. And earlier I was mentioning about the foreign policy, and one point I missed out, and I just want to highlight that as well. That is related to Ukraine. You know, if we talk about Ukraine, very recently, one of the statements which came out from the debates, and that was Trump's statements. He said that once he gets into the Oval Office, he would, of course, propose a solution to, of course, Putin, and he would talk to Putin about it, and he would come to a solution of Ukraine, because he doesn't want the war in Europe. In that context, when President Putin himself was asked about this statement, this particular statement from Trump, what he makes out of it, then he said, I'm waiting for him to get into Oval Office, and once we talk about it, then of course we can reach to a solution. So there is a sort of receptiveness when it comes to Kremlin. Kremlin is more receptive to Trump rather than Biden. So to me, I think if Trump comes into the office, then it would be more easier to get a solution for Ukraine itself.
But talking about foreign policy, of course, that is maybe not on the top priority list of the voters. So coming back to the debate of June 27th, What do you make of
from-
Joe Biden's performance in that debate, and how do you think this is going to be impacting, or this has impacted voters' confidence in Joe Biden, also his party?
You know, like we saw that there was a major shift in the way voter thinks in Pakistan's election as well, and elsewhere in India's elections. And this has been, by the way, the year of elections. I mean, most important countries of the world, they have conducted their elections this year.
Right.
So the shift, there is a shift in terms of how the voter thinks. I mean, we're talking about majority voters are millennials and post-millennials. Their way of thinking about things is entirely different. To
Right.
them,
So foreign policy remains a
remains-
significant issue.
and right now, I mean, it is being considered as the key issue this time around, once more, would be how Biden dealt with the protesters, because it is a human rights issue as well. It's the right of the people that was, of course, infringed, and the way they were, you know, very hard-handedly dealt with. This is being discussed, and that too is related to foreign policy. That too is related to how, of course, the Oval Office, you know, aligns itself with the Israel, and how they are actually part of this genocide. And that is why, I mean, genocide Joe is a phrase which is quite famous in US today. That too is related to foreign policy and the way things are moving on. I mean, the next debate is in September. Before that, I don't think Biden is ready for that debate. He won't be appearing in that debate. That too would go in favor of Trump. And if he does so, and if he's still running for his campaign and his presidency, to me, I think this incident, this particular incident that has taken place, this might shape up some kind of change in, you know, the other side as well. Biden, I mean, it would have an impact on Biden as well. So Biden might slip away, and we might see other names from the Democrats. I mean, there are other names as well. Kamala Harris is there. Then we remember Bernie Sanders. He's still echoing in the people. They are actually in favor of him as well, though he has the same age as Biden himself. Or Trump.
But Faisal,
he's-
do you think we are going to be, of course, viewing or witnessing some resistance from President Joe Biden regarding this? Like his party might have to go for 25th Amendment in regards to removing him from the
Yeah,
position?
that's a tricky question. He will resist. So far, he has been, you know, very firm about it. That there is no question about me leaving this fight,
Candidacy,
and
of
I
course.
will fight. And to me, I think he's undeterred so far.
So we have to see in coming days.
Yeah.
So Sheharyar, how do you think that Trump and Biden are, of course, reviewing and changing their election strategies, of course, in the context of these recent events?
So now, Maryam, a trend that I'm observing is that, you know, that you shouldn't be making any predictions when it comes to politics. But when it comes to President Trump, I already see him in the presidency. After yesterday, even so more. Now, if we can predict that sitting in Pakistan, you have to like see what the Europeans are thinking. So Trump in the presidency affects the globe, obviously, because of US stature as a superpower. But the main concern is with the European Union and the European counterparts, because they basically see a reduction in NATO and how the US would be dealing with NATO under the presidency of Donald Trump. So they have already started like behind the door negotiations and contacts with Trump's advisors as well. So one of the key areas on how the presidency would be treating the whole Ukraine issue, and whether the US would still want to continue funding NATO. And they know that as soon as Donald Trump comes into office, he will ask them to do more when it comes to funding NATO and when it comes to production of like weaponry. Now, when I talk to my friends in various missions in the European Union, they basically say that the economic system and the social system that they enjoy, in which they get free healthcare, free education, and a lot of like social benefits that the government provides, comes because of the fact that the US provides them security guarantees against an expansionist or an aggressive Russia. And they see that is being threatened, and their whole way of life is being threatened. So this is how they basically view President Trump and his presidency. So now they're like coming up with regulations, they're coming up with legislations in regards to the US, in which there can be some guarantees that even if President Donald Trump comes into office, and they've already predicted that he will be in office, and they want to negotiate early on how Donald Trump and the US would be having their policy or legislation in terms of NATO.
So continuity of the previous policies
exactly.
in that regard.
And in that camp, and if you look at the Donald Trump's camp, I also like see them softening up some of their policy initiatives, especially after seeing how the public has reacted to the US policy in regards to Israel and Palestine. So they're also like kind of trying to bring the center voters to their side as well.
So
and
there
like
is adaptation in the policies.
And the whole rhetoric of unifying the US, the whole rhetoric of putting like, you know, political differences aside, this is not Donald Trump. And his camp now is also like trying to bring those voters from Biden's side to their side as well.
Right.
So I see a lot of like changes in the way Donald Trump is treating this whole you know, election campaign, and he is now projecting himself as a strong leader. You know, a person who can make decisions, a person who's like strong. And you see globally now this is an era of strong men. You know, this is not an era of a president who's like, you know,
so the visuals that came out on Saturday were, of course,
that
significant.
really,
of course, Faisal wanted to add.
Maryam, I just wanted to add something related to, you know, what European voters, especially UK's voter. I mean, we saw 412. It was, I mean, Modi kept on saying, "Ab ki baar 400 par," but he couldn't go, but Labour Party did. And Labour Party coming into office, and just before the election, one day before the election, I actually came across with one of the British diplomats, and he was so sure that they are going to outclass everyone. And reason behind it is, once again, Ukraine war. They want a quick solution. People of UK want a quick solution to Ukraine war. Reason being, not only UK, but the whole Europe is being affected by Ukraine war, energy crisis, because their energy needs, they were
global oil prices have gone up.
The basic needs of their energy, they were being fulfilled from Russia. So Russia was obviously sending them gas and all. So at that time it was very cheap. But as soon as they got into this Ukraine crisis, they increased the tariffs, and then they actually, you know, the whole burden went on Europe. So in Europe, energy crisis is key, and the elections which are being, of course, fought in Europe at this hour, they are being fought on this particular issue because the energy crisis has actually hit the you know, barriers of inflation, and people at large, they are affected by it. And to me, I think they themselves are looking for a very quick solution to Ukraine crisis, and for them, Trump is the answer to their problems as well.
Right. And of course, it has led to migration crisis in the Europe as well. But Ali Sarwar, Naqvi Saab, when we talk about both Republicans and Democrats, what do you make of the way that they are dealing with, or the campaigns are dealing with, the independent candidates like of course Robert F. Kennedy Jr.?
Yes, well, let me, Maryam, make a point which might get missed in the whole discussion. And that is that it is very ironic that Donald Trump, who was a great supporter and is a great supporter of the National Rifle Association, NRA, which has been a major funder to his campaign, he has been now subject of a assassination attempt. A gun used by a 20-year-old who had no previous experience of violence or any record of violence, and he took a pot shot at Donald Trump because of the fact that he had access to a gun. And gun control is a major issue in American politics, and it is very ironic that Donald Trump, a supporter of no gun control has now been subjected to an assassination attempt. Anyway, now as far as the electorate, you talked about the Republicans and the Democrats, I think they are gearing up for a exercise of their vote in favor of a candidate who represents substantive reforms. Uh, Trump is controversial, but he also represents the reforms that he envisages in the US system. And therefore, I think that he is more likely to succeed because Biden, as I said earlier, is the status quo candidate. And the status quo candidate represents no major change. And here, the American society is now ripe for changes, necessary changes, both in terms of domestic politics, in terms of foreign policy, in terms of immigration policy. So, the entire range of issues that face the American public, jobs, economic security, uh, tax cuts, the whole range of issues that can be envisaged are there for the candidates to deal with. And I think the Republicans are also poised for a success this time because there has been a Democratic administration and not very effective, not much to write home about, as they say. And the Republicans are poised to get back into office after Obama and Biden. So this is the lay of the land, as they say.
Right, and Naqvi Saab, coming back to foreign policy, how do you think that, what implications these elections might hold for Pakistan-US relations in the coming days?
Well, some people are very optimistic that with Trump there will be a renewed interest in Pakistan because Biden has more or less ignored Pakistan. And there is now the report of a dialogue that is going to start between Pakistan and US on a bilateral level. So it is possible that things may get a little better, but they won't get much better because of the Indo-US strategic partnership. And the US is very concerned about the security of Asia Pacific, where I think India has a role to play. And therefore, US will continue its partnership with India also for countering China, because China is now a competitor of the US in the Asia Pacific, in the South China Sea, in the East China Sea, in the Indian Ocean. So this is global politics at play. And I think against this background, the relationship with Pakistan will take shape. I think despite the negatives, the United States would be interested in engaging with Pakistan, and particularly on counterterrorism and on drug control and climate change. If the US continues with its policies of climate change, so I think there are areas in which there can be cooperation, but I don't think there will be any major improvement of Pakistan-US relations.
Right. And Faisal, what do you make of course, both candidates' foreign policies regarding, of course, South Asia? Do you think there is going to be a shift towards the region?
Yeah, I do see a shift in terms of Trump. I mean, to a certain extent, I would agree with the ambassador. But when it comes to Trump and the current scenario, bilateral relations between US and India, of course, in the recent times, we know that the Sikh leader attempted murder on him, and the way diplomatic fuss has created between both of the countries. And while we are seeing that relatively lesser number of support Modi got in India, in this whole context, I mean, I see a different sort of relationship between India and US in coming future, and I see more of a balanced approach. And if it is Trump, then the kind of activism we saw in recent times by, of course, Pakistani politicians as well, and the American politicians as well at the same time, the way they were, of course, poking their noses in Pakistan's affairs. I can simply say that in coming future, if it is Trump's government, then we will see a change. And we shouldn't be forgetting one aspect of it, that we should all be seeing towards how Labour government they react to Pakistan, and they react to whatever is happening in Pakistan. And if their stance is sort of a nature that can, of course, shape of changes in Pakistan, then we might see that if Trump is in the office, then they would be in a position to, of course, support Pakistan. We shouldn't be forgetting one thing, that Pakistan and US and the Western powers, I mean, Pakistan has been their ally for way longer time than India itself is an ally of them.
Right.
And that alliance is not shaping up well so far. That is why it's not a military alliance, it's just a Quad, it's just the official alliance, it's not the military alliance at all. I mean, they have their military alliance in shape of AUKUS, they don't have Quad as a military alliance.
Right.
So to me, I think
there is going to be a shift towards
there is a bright future when it comes to Pakistan having good relations with US and UK.
Right, right. And Sheharyar, briefly coming back to the elections, what measures are going to be needed this time around to ensure the integrity of election process?
Well, this time around, when it comes to elections, there are like a lot of initiatives that are already being taken, and a lot of these initiatives are taking lessons from the last elections, in which the losing candidate basically criticized the whole process. So this time around, there's like a lot of legislation that has already been done, and that's like primarily focusing on the use of social media and how TikTok, Facebook, and other social media platforms will be regulated, and how the US regulators and the Senate committees that basically focus on these regulations, they've already done their homework, and a lot of like social media platforms, they've also put checks and barriers in place, in which how much each party and like those candidates and the lobbying firms can basically spend on social media, how targeted ads would be, how the algorithms are basically being generated, and how they will be influencing the US voter. So that is already being done, and I think this time around it will be very difficult for the losing candidate to question the integrity of the votes. The US,
right. So lastly, let me of course go to Ali Sarwar Naqvi Sahab. Ali Sarwar Naqvi Sahab, very briefly tell us what are the long-term implications of this US presidential elections on the global politics?
Well, if Trump comes to office, there will be some long-term implications. But if Biden remains in office, gets re-elected, then I don't think there will be that much of an impact. Now, if Biden comes to office, there will be a change, first place, in the US dealings or contact or interaction with Europe. Because in the past administration, Trump was always critical of the European powers, that they were depending too much on the Americans. And, I think NATO is in any case a dinosaur. There is no need for NATO, but it continues to accumulate more members, and it keeps on spreading its tentacles everywhere. That is why the Russians moved into Ukraine. It was because of the threat that Ukraine might join NATO that the Russian president took that step, which was unfortunate because it's causing a lot of suffering of the Ukrainian people. But that was the trigger that caused it. So I think Trump is going to correct it to some extent.
We are pressed for time. Thank you very much, Ali Sarwar Naqvi Sahab, for joining us in today's program. Thank you very much, Mr. Raja Faisal, for joining us in today's program. Thank you very much, Mr. Sheharyar Khan, for joining us in today's program. Of course, as we are gearing up for these elections, we are going to be witnessing these elections to be held on 5th November. These elections are not only going to be shaping America's future, but having long-term implications for global politics as well. That's all from Game Changer tonight. Take care. Allah Hafiz.